What's going on, everybody? This is Gibby Gutierrez, also known as Gibby Joe, here on YouTube with a tutorial today on how to use Headus UV Layout. Headus UV Layout is a standalone 3D UV unwrapping tool. It's great for organic models such as characters, or rocks, or slugs, or anything with lots of curves in it. It's great for unwrapping those tools. It really streamlines your 3D workflow. It can really help with your texturing, and it's great for unwrapping characters and things like that and importing them into ZBrush or whatever you feel like. Yeah, this is an intermediate level tutorial. This already assumes that you have a general working knowledge of 3D, because we're going to be covering some mid-level topics, and I really don't want to stop and explain some of the more basic stuff. And if you'd like to follow along with this tutorial, all these files that I'm using right now are going to be in a zip folder that I've posted in the information area of this video. It's going to come with a couple of OBJ file formats and one Maya file, and of course a UV texture map, so that way you can test stuff out. I'm really fond of this particular test map. It's really cool. And it helps. It's really helpful when checking your UV space and your texel density, which is the $5 word for today. Texel density. I don't know the etymology of that, so we'll just go on. What you're going to need, if you want to follow along, is a 3D application of choice. I'm going to be using Maya, or you can import those OBJ file formats into just about any 3D application. Headus does use the OBJ file format as well, and you're probably going to need a copy of Headus. And fortunately, Headus is really nice. You can just Google it, UV Layout, and go to their homepage, and they have this nice little button on the left that says Try, and you can download it for Windows, Mac OS X, and also for Linux. So there's no excuse for you to not follow along and know of the brilliance of Headus UV Layout. So exactly. And the other thing you're going to need is a 3-button mouse. I know, who doesn't have a 3-button mouse, right, Mr. Man? I don't know what you're talking about, because I have a 3-button mouse. I have 6 of them just to make sure. Don't know where that came from, but yeah. So let's close Headus for a second, and let's jump into Maya. Now, here in Maya, I've modeled these guys. Hey, what's up? What's up? This amazing rock and the character that we're looking at. Let's hide you for a second. And I've modeled this amazing rock. This rock is spectacular. Just know its majesty, as you can see right here. It's pretty amazing, or underwhelming. I haven't figured it out. This was extruded from a cube, and so its UVs are really gross. As you can tell, it looks like something terribly phallic. But we'll close that up, and we're going to have this. We're going to import this into Headus by exporting it as an OBJ, which is already in the help files, and we're going to unwrap it there, bring it back into Maya, and then you'll see the splendor of unwrapping things in Headus. So let's launch Headus right now. It says Run UV Layout. And this interface is really DOS-tastic. I mean, look at it. It's just really kind of meh. Anything below display and below, I should say, we're really not going to be concerned about. It's what we care about is this load, save, and these numbers up here. I don't even know what E or update does. And then about, whatever. Awesome. So prior versions of Headus UV Layout were kind of buggy, and let's check this version that we have. It's 2.005. Anything below 2.00, you're pretty much going to run into a bug-tacular environment with Headus. It's really known to crash, and that's what these temp files are for. So as you're working along, it's really good to work with these temp files. You know, just clicking on them, and they change color too, so that way you know which step you're on. It'll save you a lot of frustration if it does crash on you, and on occasion some of your models will crash Headus. But let's load up a really simple rock like we've done. So let's hit load, and it brings up this lovely dialog box. This looks something out of 1984. Let's go to directory, and lazily I've put all my files on the desktop. Let's click on that, and it shows up in here, and I have no idea why. So let's open up this amazing rock nouvs.obj, we'll click on that. But before we hit load, let's check out these load options down here. And we want to make sure that some of these settings are correct as we import them. You're not working with subdivisions. Who works with subdivisions nowadays? Nobody. Crazy people. No, I'm just kidding. There's like 2 people. Let's stick with poly. And we want a new UV set every time. We don't want to necessarily edit these, so we're just getting new. And the other 2 things that we want to check are weld UVs and clean. This is just to help Headus not crash so much. And also if your model is a little finicky or not as clean as you'd like it, it does its best to load up something that's really clean. But because this is only a 52 triangle rock, it's probably not going to have too much of a problem. So after these options are clicked, let's hit load on that. And the first thing you're going to see is a perspective window with this thing, with our rock in there. And Headus is really basic, or it seems that way. All it displays is these edges and faces that we have in our model, because that's what it is. And you can't even select the verts or anything like that. So to maneuver in this window, you're going to want to left mouse button click, and that will tumble your model. You tumble in 3D space. And your middle mouse button will move your object in 3D space. Imagine that. And then the right mouse button click, when using it with up or down or left and right, will zoom in on your model. And yeah, that's pretty much that. And then we're going to go over the general workflow for using Headus. Is you want to cut pieces on your 3D object which translate into UV shells. So it's kind of cool. It's really interactive and really neat, and it helps you really visualize where your UV shells are going to be and where your seams are going to be and your cuts and slices. It's fantastic that way. So the first thing that you want to do is make cuts, and then once you have your 3D model kind of like splayed out, you can drop those pieces into the UV editor, and then we'll flatten them out. But let's get to cutting right here. So the first hotkey that we're going to go over is C. It's probably the most important hotkey for cutting. And the another thing that's about Headus is that it's mouse contextual. So wherever your mouse is on this, wherever you're working with your workspace, that's where Headus assumes that you're going to be working. And because we're going to be slicing edges off, it's contextual. So we have our mouse hovering over this particular edge right here. And if we hit the shortcut for cutting, or the command for cutting, which is C, you're going to hit C, and it makes the cut. It even tells you in the little corner right there, oh my gosh, you've made a cut. And what Headus has done, wisely, is figure out this edge loop. With hit or miss results, you'll find out later on. In fact, we'll go through an example of like how this can do what it feels like, and whenever it feels like it. So we made this cut around the bottom of the rock, and this rock was poorly modeled, but I left this purposely so I can show you how to slice off things and how to place things in the UV editing part. So we've made our first cut right here, and this red line is the initial cut that we made with the C key, and these yellow lines is where Headus has interpreted this edge loop to follow. And it's pretty cool that way. It does work a majority of the time. Sometimes it'll do whatever it wants, but it's a really easy fix to do that. And now the second hotkey that we're going to learn is Enter. Enter will separate whatever piece you've just cut off. So let's hit Enter while hovering over this with our mouse. Bam! Look at that. Separated into 3D spaces in 3 dimensions. That's 1 extra dimension in paper, which is awesome. And it really helps. Headus really helps you visualize where your UV shells are going to be and how they're going to be sliced and laid out and stuff. And like I said, the majority of your grunt work for unwrapping will be done in here, and then you're going to fine-tune it in your 3D application of choice, just to get everything really squared away and nice and pretty and efficient, especially if you're modeling for games or something, or even for ZBrush texturing and sculpting. So let's make another cut up here. Let's cut off the little hat that this rock has right up here, and we're going to run into a little problem that Headus has at times. And so let's hover over this area and make a cut right here, and you can see where Headus decided to interpretate this edge loop. Kind of did this wonky. We actually wanted to go up this way, but in fact Headus decided, well, no, I'm going to take this road over here, and then I'm going to continue it over here, and then I'm going to feel like stopping because I don't feel like figuring out what to do next. It's really easy just to keep working through this. That is the mantra of old Headus versions, where you just keep plowing through and do what you want. So let's make another cut here, and we'll fix up all these other stray cuts that it's made over here. We'll make another cut there and here just to make sure. So now we have this sectioned off, but these cuts are still in place, and so if we try to separate them, this would separate, but these might also break everything in half. So let's go over our third hotkey, which is W for weld, and we're going to weld up these seams that Headus has automatically interpreted for us. Weld this up, and now we just have our hat just sitting there all nice and pretty, and we're going to separate him again by pushing enter. There we go. And now our rock is divided into nice 3 sections. We have the bottom, the middle, and the top little hat. And this, just like with other 3D applications when you're trying to unwrap, this middle section is too big. It's really huge, and it's just going to create a huge mess of UVs when we try to unfold it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to help Headus move along by making a cut here. And so now we have this cut on this little UV shell. But instead of cutting it again, like we made the cut, but nothing happened. Like we can't separate it. See how it just moves up along with whatever it is? That's because this cut isn't really a cut. It's actually a slice. And so what we're going to do is flay this open so that way it unfolds a little bit better and a lot easier for Headus. And that hotkey to slice something is Shift S. And we've just made a slice into that, and you can see really quickly and visually how that works. And so now we have 3 separate UV shells on this. And our rock is pretty much done. And this is where saving with these temp files comes into play. The older versions of Headus, when you started dropping objects into the UV editor, it would start farting on itself and die, and then you'd be like, I just lost all my work. And then you'd cry. You'd come back after some Tylenols and cigarettes and start working again. But let's use these wonderful temp tools. We're probably not going to run into this issue working on such a low poly object and a simple object at that. But let's use them anyway just to get into the habit. So let's hit temp 1, and you can see it's redded out because that's a step version that we're on. And now we are ready to drop these into our UV editor. And the next hotkey that we're going to go over is the D key. And the D key will drop things into UV editor. D for drop. Fantastic. And if at any time you need a reference to the hotkeys on here, whatever menu or wherever particular part of the program you're in, you can always hit G, and all these hot buttons, all the hotkeys show up. Although they don't really make much sense most of the time, and so good luck with that. They kind of go away when you click or do something else. And you can always undo everything as well. You can hit Control Z and that, but we're going to resplit that again. Split that. See the nice. And so now let's drop these in. I generally, if you're working with something that's symmetrical, I will generally go left to right, left to right, left to right, and all the things, and then down the middle. But because this thing is asymmetrical and it's just 3 little UV shells, we'll just drop them from the top to the bottom. So let's mouse over this top part, hit D, and drop that in there. Middle part, D, and the last little bit, D. And it takes us into this 3D check, like this 3D perspective checking window. Now it looks kind of like the same, except you see exactly where our UV cuts were and where our UV seams are. Later on this screen we'll come back to it, and it will show you like your texel density of your spacing and how even your UVs are according to in relation to each other. And we'll see that right now. So from this 3D menu that it's dropped us into, not 3D menu, this 3D perspective let's drop us into, let's hit the U key. The U key will take us into the UV editor. Bam. Bam. And to maneuver around in this, it's pretty much the same thing. Your left mouse button will select things, but because we're in a 2D space, there's no reason to tumble. So our middle mouse button is what's moving this around, and then we zoom in with the right mouse button key. And while in UV mode, and you can see this UV 0 to 1 space, and it's stretched out over it. You really don't want to mess with the scale of these things, because everything is going to be generally really uniform. And let's learn the biggest function of Headus. Aside from slicing and looking at all your UVs in 3D space, like this, you can do this by hitting 3. Let's go back to the UV editor by pushing U. One of the big advantages of this is its ability to flatten, and the flatten hotkey is F, just as you would expect. So let's take this middle part because it's nice. It's a nice even piece of geometry, really simple, and let's hit flatten on it. So hit F, and you can see what Headus is trying to do. It flattens it out and turns it all sorts of colors, and you'll see with some of these other objects that it's really easy to do. And so now this 3D object has been flattened on this 2D UV space, and you can maneuver it by holding the magic key for this is the space bar. The space bar, in conjunction with the mouse button clicks, will totally be able to move all these flattened objects around. So if you held spacebar and hit the left mouse button key, you can rotate it. The middle mouse button will move it. And here's the caveat: you don't really want to do this very much because the UVs right now, without messing around with them too much, are pretty much on even spacing. And what space and the right mouse button will do is change the scale. And I know it's really tempting to really mess around in here and get everything to work and congregate properly in this little 0 to 1 space, but I would save for using that. I would save doing that for a bigger program like Maya, which has a lot more tools to it in the UV editing. I mean, you can just do just about everything in here. Take one, move it, and it's just a lot more robust in other programs. And let's close this off real quick. But I know it's tempting to change around the scale in Headus just to get everything to fit. It's really nice, but I suggest holding off on that because you could really mess up some stuff. In particular, your ratio, your magic ratio that Headus does works so hard for you. So let's move these objects in here. Let's flatten this little top hat over here and see what's going on. So let's bleh. And Headus does some weird stuff. As you get more heavy poly counts, it does look a little creepy. And you can tell the difference right now in this red and green colors that we have on these flattened objects. Everybody, UVs and Headus, the greener they are, the happier they are. And blue is almost super amazing. But red, the more pink and red that this becomes, the more unproportional the UV space is and the texel density. And so everybody, you want to generally work and strive to get everything green as possible. We'll make some more examples over here. So let's take this object, let's move him out of the way, and then we're going to hit the unfold key again, F for unfold. And you can see how it moves kind of creepy and organic, and it looks a little gross, actually. And you can see what's happening here. Now, this, like I said, the magic color to be is green. And if we switch over to our 3D preview by pushing 3, you can now really see what the texel density is on this. So all this green on the bottom portion of the rock is all nice and stuff, but this hat is really unhappy. Looks like a little zit that it has up there. It's all red and irritated. So let's go back to the UV editor and we'll see what we can do over here. And a lot of the tools that you've used in the previous 3D perspective area will work here. So let's make this hat a little bit happier. And just like this portion of the rock where we sliced it over here, we're going to make another slice here, but we don't have the slice function here. We do have the cut function, however. So let's go to one of these edges and we'll make a cut right here. And we've just made that cut just like we would a slice over here. And then let's try unfolding that again by pushing the F key. And you can see it got a little bit happier, not too much, but at least two sides are much better. And if we check the 3D preview again by pushing 3, you can see that it's a little less pink, more salmony. I don't know. What is that color? No one knows. And it probably won't ever get too super happy, but yeah, let's move these around a bit, get these working all properly. And there's a couple of other keys that you can do to make some of this stuff work. Now, use caution when using these. These are pretty extreme sometimes, and they're only available here in UV edit mode. And so the hotkeys for that is when you're mousing over something are the B, C, and X, and the X hotkeys on the keyboard. The B is kind of is the old school version on older versions of Headus before the F key was introduced just to flatten out everything in general. You'd flatten out everything manually by pushing B and kind of massaging your UVs into place and flattening them out. You can't really tell because there's not much geometry to work with here. But what you will see, we'll use this key just right now, whoops, is the X key. The X key kind of it works as a collapse. You got to be really careful with it because it can have some really crazy results, and the flatten button won't work properly with it. But just to show you what it does, we can always undo this. Is hover over it, hit X, and you can see that it's kind of like collapsing all this UVs. It's great for really personalizing everything, but you can see where it's really unhappy. I mean, look how red that looks. Darn it, no one likes to be red in this thing, and that's my favorite color. So if you try flattening it again, it's not going to happen. You can always undo that, undo what you did, but just to recover from that, like sometimes it's really good to really go in there and figure out what your UVs are doing, and you have a lot of control over it. But once you've collapsed something using the X hotkey, the X brush, you can hit B, and that will kind of work the way it's supposed to. The flatten brush works because this is the way the old Headus worked, this way. But for now, let's just stick with F and the B's and stuff, and just to get this out of the way. So that's how you unwrap in Headus. It takes a lot getting used to, but there's a lot of tools. It really does cut down on a lot of unwrapping time, especially if you have a really complex organic model. I have modeled this 3D griffin that was, I don't even feel like pulling it up right now, and it was a pain in the butt to unwrap in Maya alone. But I did use Headus UV, and it's crazy, absolutely crazy. You can check it out on my website if you'd like. So let's save this out now. This is our rock. Let's go back to our preview window, and it's mostly happy with the exception of this little red mark that it has up there. It's because you could make it a little bit more efficient, but this is just a really quick tutorial. Well, sort of quick. Let's save this out again. Let's make another temp file. You can see it's transitioned over to the 1, so it's available again, but you'll typically keep moving forward. I think if you create 3s and 4s, yeah, I can see the other ones that make, and these are the ones that are available. So anyway, this 3D rock is now ready to be saved out. Let's go back to our UV editor. We'll hit save, and it goes back in this, and there's our temp files, so we can load them in case you cry or break something. And we'll just save this out down here, and this is kind of the other yucky part about their UI is Amazing Rock No UVs will now be named Amazing Rock with UVs. So original. And you kind of set that up right here, and then we're going to hit save. There we go, and it showed up there. Let's dismiss this. I know, what does that mean? And so now we can kind of exit out of here. Let's exit. Do you really want to exit? Of course I do. I know what I'm doing. Not at all. So let's hide Mr. Amazing Rock, the original one. Now look at these UVs. They were gross and based off of that cube that they were extruded from. And let's hide this. And let's re-import the Amazing Rock with UVs. So this is the OBJ file that we fixed up with UVs in Headus. Let's import that. And it should be in the exact same place, and it looks pretty much exactly the same. And if you check, this is the outliner. You can check your graph editor or whatever you work with in whatever program. Here's the Headus OBJ export. You can always rename that because it does name that. It does slap on that naming convention. But if you go and open up our UVs in our UV editor, you can see that it's retained all this now. It's retained all your UV cuts and edits that you've done in Headus. And so now you can just take your UVs and cram them down into this section of the UV editor. And there you go. I know it's a really gross, ugly rock, but it can be made pretty when it feels like it. And just run it through a light simulator and everything will look good. And I hope this tutorial has helped you get started with Headus UV Layout. It's a pretty robust program. There's a lot of nuances. It does come with documentation, but it's a little wonky, and I hope this helps to explain a little bit more of this. And we'll see you around for another tutorial. Take it easy. Have a good one.